June 14th, 1998. WCW's Great American Bash pay-per-view explodes out of the Baltimore arena. Dean Malenko is about to lose his temper, his mind, his base of being a man all over Chris Jericho via chair shot. How was the typically ice-cold demeanored Malenko pushed to this brink by Jericho? Well, sounds like we gotta rewind this feud. Now, to really grasp the gravity of the situation, you have to appreciate the entire picture. At this time in 1998, this was the early part of it. We were just at the tail end of that 80-plus week period where WCW was absolutely spanking the WWF in the ratings. They were doing this by and large with pushing, at the time, an edgier product. Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall had formed the NWO, and they were doing great business. I mean, they were doing really, really intriguing TV, and as a young man, I was 13, 14 at the time, it was something that held my attention. One thing that WCW did better than WWF at the time was really showcase the cruiserweights. I think some would argue that WCW did this almost accidentally, where at the time, wrestling by and large was still a land of giants. Unless you were 6'7", 270 pounds, you weren't going to be smelling the main event scene. It just wasn't going to happen. What WCW had done with Nitro at the time was the first hour was almost entirely dedicated to either competitors from the world of lucha, or in this case, competitors that were incidentally the same size I was. Under 6 feet, definitely not nowhere near 300 pounds, but guys who were equally as skilled, equally as tactical, and most importantly, were able to tell a really good story. The main two characters of what we're focusing on today are Dean Malenko and Chris Jericho. Malenko, definitely one of the greatest unsung wrestlers of the last 30 to 40 years. At this time, in 1998, he was 37-38. He was playing that grizzled road warrior type of veteran. Just the prior year, 1997, Pro Wrestling Illustrated had voted him the #1 wrestler on the planet. Now, would I agree with this? I would say at the time he was definitely on the short list as far as just in-ring tactician, someone who maybe doesn't look like $1 million, but he definitely looks like somebody who could stretch you if he wanted to and could do it really easily. Incidentally, one of his main nicknames was a man of 1,000 holds, which we'll be coming back to in a little bit. Now, up until this point, it's been said Malenko was a well-beloved performer. If you've never seen Dean Malenko, all you need to imagine is that he is the Canadian version of John McClane. Of course, that means that Jericho is going to end up being his Hans Gruber, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Malenko was revered for his in-ring work, but he had begun to go on a little bit of a losing streak. He was starting to have some self-doubts creep in, maybe some thoughts about retirement. Being as of the recording of this, I am roughly, if not a little bit older than Dean was when this feud was happening. I can tell you as a late 30, soon to be 40-year-old man, that the doubts, the self-awareness, particularly in a negative type of mind frame, it can be really debilitating. Of course, as a young teenager watching this, I'm not intuitively putting this all together. However, I think anyone who's ever had to compare themselves to their peers and maybe just had that little whisper in the back of your head, that's just saying maybe not. I think really deep down, we can all empathize with that. Who hasn't been in that situation? It gives this character so much meat to chew on that you can't help but to feel for him. I mean, he's just looking like an average man. Except he goes out there and he ties people up. And of course, the man that Dean would be facing across the ring for this feud is the one, the only, Chris Jericho. In so many ways, the polar opposite to everything that Malenko is. It's almost like these characters were perfectly written for this time, for this moment in history. Now, Jericho wasn't a rookie by any stretch of the imagination by this point. He was already 28, an 8 to 10 year veteran, done some great work in Japan and Mexico. And at this point, Jericho was starting to get some shine stateside. He was the current cruiserweight champion, and currently he was a babyface, quickly turning into a heel. At the sold-out pay-per-view on January 24th of 1998, he had a match against Rey Mysterio, which he won, and then assaulted Rey after the match, particularly focusing on his knee. He also had a title defense versus Juventud Guerrero, which was a mask versus title defense. Jericho won. The Juice had to lose his mask, and this just made everybody hate Jericho. Obviously, this is a man who gives little about history or the respect of lucha, and he gives even less about any type of manly respect. It's literally a match made in heaven. You have the grizzled veteran, the plucky young heel, and they circle each other. And it comes to a head. March 15th, 1998, WCW runs their uncensored pay-per-view in Mobile, Alabama. The third match of the night, Jericho wins via Lion Tamer. About 15-minute match. How do you feel about the star ratings? Uncle Dave Meltzer gave it 3 3/4. I'd probably rate it a little bit higher, but that's just me. What makes this moment so magical is the post-match. Because Jericho pieces out, and Malenko is sitting there in the ring, gnashing his teeth, sort of looking perplexed, sort of looking at a loss for words. The classic Mean Gene Okerlund climbs into the ring, and really he starts browbeating Dean Malenko a little bit. It's sort of surprising, but it kind of helps hammer home the point that Dean isn't just an everyman wrestler, but really he is the proxy of the everyman, and by him not winning, he's letting everybody down. The promo ends when Mean Gene simply asks him, "Where does one go from here?" And as a destroyed and distraught man at the end of his rope, Malenko says what I imagine any other person would say in that situation. Home. Now, at this point, we have no idea. Is Malenko retiring? He was sort of hinting at that. Is he coming back? Did he leave the company? We have no clue. One of the benefits of the pre-social media age was you could play an angle off like this, and someone like Dean in this situation wouldn't necessarily have to do anything abnormal in his life to sort of go radio silent, so to speak. All he had to do was pretty much not be at a TV taping, and they could play that angle off. And let me tell you, it was beautiful. Because with Jericho, he just went on a rampage. He was over the next couple months, he just systematically and psychologically beats Malenko down and tears him apart. Kicks off with a fever pitch at the March 30th Nitro tapings out of the United Center of Chicago. Jericho has a pretty quick and forgettable match with Marty Jannetty, and people only remember that because of what happened afterwards. Jericho grabs a mic and he delivers his now infamous Man of 1,004 Holds.
I came prepared. Excuse me. Malenko, you claim to be the man of 1,000 holds, but I counted, and you know about 60, but I know 1,004, and I wrote them all down. Here we go. Hold 1, arm drag. Hold 2, arm bar. Hold 3, the moss-covered, 3-handled family gradunzel.
Why doesn't he just mail us this list and we'll announce it?
Bar.
He's just ranting.
Number 5, the Saskatchewan spinning nerve hold.
This must be meathead microphone night. You think so?
He's got 998 to go. 9,
Get the hook. We're out of here. Shut up.
Get a haircut. Number 10, right-handed punch.
This is used literally just to get under Dean's skin and to get Jericho some heat. And it pays off very well. This promo goes through a commercial break. And when we come back from commercial break, I remember watching it as a kid. I couldn't believe that he was still going.
We're back, fans.
Hold number 712. Arm bar.
Can we physically get him out of the ring?
I can.
Yeah, but you've got to announce. I know you can.
Hold number 714.
This is the promo where every other hold is an arm bar or a 3-fingered family credunzel, and the crowd is frothing at the mouth. They want to rip his throat out. At the time, I was loving it because even as a kid, I sort of always sided with the heels, but at the same time, part of being a fan was you always wanted to see the heels get beat up. And for a while, they did the smart move and didn't have Jericho really get his comeuppance. An additional added wrinkle to the story during this time was Jericho was starting his conspiracy victim side quest character, so to speak. It was a classic conspiracy story that everybody was out against him and to get him. It helped add a little bit of humanity to the character, but not sympathy. It just adds more depth and layers to this character that shows that he's not mythical. He is a person. He might be a flawed, terrible person, yet he's still a person. It's little things like that that help you care about what happens to that character. Without that little bit of the conspiracy victim gimmick, if he had waited until later to do that, maybe it could have stood on its own accord a little bit more. I believe that part of the character persona for this version of Jericho worked wonders and was an absolute masterstroke. Over the next couple months, he just systematically and psychologically beats Malenko down and tears him apart. Kicks off with a fever pitch at the March 30th Nitro tapings out of the United Center of Chicago. Jericho has a pretty quick and forgettable match with Marty Jannetty, and people only remember that because of what happened afterwards. Jericho grabs a mic and he delivers his now infamous Man of 1,004 holds. This is used literally just to get under Dean's skin and to get Jericho some heat. And it pays off very well. This promo goes through a commercial break. And when we come back from commercial break, I remember watching it as a kid. I couldn't believe that he was still going. This is the promo where every other hold is an arm bar or a 3-fingered family credunzel. And the crowd is frothing at the mouth. They want to rip his throat out. At the time, I was loving it because even as a kid, I sort of always sided with the heels, but at the same time, part of being a fan was you always wanted to see the heels get beat up. And for a while, they did the smart move and didn't have Jericho really getting his comeuppance. A couple weeks later, the May 4th Nitro taping, Jericho brings out a framed picture of Dean. And he starts disparaging that. Primarily, he starts disparaging Dean's devotion and his love to his late father, who was also a professional wrestler by the name of Boris Malenko. Now, if you've ever had anybody talk trash about a parent, if you have a good relationship with that parent, a good positive one, you know how much that cuts. Once again, through all this, there is absolutely nobody really defending Dean. Until a couple weeks later, where Joe Malenko, Dean's actual brother, attempts to defend his honor and his father's. It doesn't really end up very well for Joe, as he gets attacked by Jericho. I mean, at this point, Jericho might be the most hated man on the roster. And honestly, I can't blame anybody for hating him. I hated him too, even though I loved him. Another thing that I love is the old Slamboree pay-per-views. This was a good one too in 1998. It came during May 17th out of Worcester, Massachusetts. The two matches of note that we have to talk about are going to be the third and fourth matches on the card respectively. The first match is a battle royal to determine the number one contender for Chris Jericho's WCW Cruiserweight Championship. This is your typical battle royal fare. A lot of lucha, a lot of speedy, high-flying moves. Ultimately, it's going to come down to Juventud and Ciclope. What we're going to get is a good old-fashioned standoff, stare down, handshake show of respect, and then Juvi, he just eats himself out of there. Ciclope's your winner. Now, what happens next? At the time, my 13-year-old brain couldn't even comprehend, but it is still to this day one of the loudest pops I have ever heard in my life.
He's back! The man of 1,000 homes! The man that will face Jericho for the title right now!
The best part about this is the match happens immediately afterwards. The only thing that I'll give this match a negative review on is, given the circumstances, I would have cut off a little bit of time. Regardless, the outcome is exactly what you would want to see in a story like this, where Malenko finally gets his revenge. Not only does he spend the better part of 7 minutes just beating the absolute tar out of Chris Jericho, but he makes Jericho tap to the Texas Cloverleaf, getting back his championship, and it also gives us one of my favorite Bobby Heenan lines, the world's toughest pumpkin. Now, you would think this would be a pretty decent place to wrap up this feud. Granted, it's only been a couple months, but it had a pretty solid middle, beginning, and end. Well, not quite yet. Because what happens in classic too many cooks in the kitchen, a slight overbook situation, is that the general manager for Nitro, J.J. Dillon, declares that, well, since Cyclops and not Dean Malenko won, Dean Malenko is not the rightful cruiserweight champion. Even as a young kid, that didn't reconcile with me, because if that was the case, then why did the match go through? I mean, like, am I the only one thinking that? Or, anyway, regardless, the slight tinge of overbooking is sort of smoothed over when Dean, being the man of integrity that he is, declares that if him giving up that belt is going to give him one last chance to get at Jericho, he's going to take it. And let me tell you, if you ever wanted to kick the snot out of somebody and you got a second chance at that, I think you would take it. So that's what brings us to the culmination of this feud, the Great American Bash, June 14th of 1998. We're back in the Baltimore Arena, and the third match of our card tonight is the Cruiserweight Championship match. It is a relatively quick-paced 14-minute affair. Most of the time, Jericho is going to be spent doing his typical heel shtick of just talking nothing but mess to Dean Malenko, trying to get this man to break. They call him Malenko the Iceman because he shows no emotion. What we've been seeing, especially since he came back as Cyclops, was Dean becoming a little unhinged. He's becoming unglued. Maybe he's not in touch with his emotions as much as we all like to think that he is. In a way, as a reflection of ourselves. Well, it comes to a head because Jericho says one too many things about Malenko's late father, and Malenko DQs himself, rightfully so, by taking a chair and just beating down on Jericho like it's an Arizonan monsoon. Like, we are talking 1998 unprotected chair shots. I'm not sure if that chair is gimmicked or not. That shit looked really, really painful. Now, you might be saying, well, that doesn't give us a good, positive ending to our feud. I mean, Jericho wins via DQ, and the good guy loses. And that is precisely why this feud works so well, and is so great, and it is timeless. Because if you're a halfway decent person, you've been the good person who doesn't win. And let's be honest, if you've been the heel in a situation, sometimes you've come out on top, maybe in a circumstance where you shouldn't have. Regardless, this is a timeless story of good versus evil. Life isn't fair. You gotta deal with it. Keep going on. Old trying to outduel young. A timeless battle. Timeless set of matches. A timeless feud. And a timeless time with me today. Hopefully that's not copyright infringement. Anyway, thank you for listening. This is the Feud Rewind. Once again, if you have any suggestions, any ideas, just want to say hi, you want to send me some hate mail, feudrewind@gmail.com. Thank you so much, and have a good week.